Day 21. You've done it. 21 straight days of the gym. The journal. The early wake-up. Today's supposed to be the day it finally clicks. The day it becomes automatic. Effortless. Part of who you are. It doesn't click. It doesn't click at all. You still have to force yourself out of bed. You still have to talk yourself into the gym. Nothing feels automatic. Nothing at all. So you quit. Not loudly. Just quietly. No announcement. No drama. You tell yourself it obviously wasn't the right habit for you, since 21 days was supposed to be enough, and it clearly wasn't working. Here's the actual problem. That number was never real. Not for habits. Not for anything. Not ever. Stick with me, because by the end of this, you'll know exactly where that number came from, why it's been repeated for 60 years anyway, and what the real timeline actually looks like. Let's start with where 21 days even came from, because the origin story alone should make you suspicious. It wasn't a habit study. It wasn't even psychology research in the way you'd expect. It came from a plastic surgeon, working in the 1960s, watching his patients adjust to their new faces after surgery. He noticed something specific. It took them roughly 3 weeks to stop flinching at their own reflection. Separately, he noticed something else. Amputees took about that same amount of time to stop feeling a phantom limb. He wrote about this observation in a book. Somewhere along the way, it takes about 3 weeks to adjust to a major physical change, quietly turned into, it takes 21 days to build any habit. Nobody tested that second claim. It just spread because it was short, clean, and easy to repeat. For 60 years, gyms, self-help books, and productivity apps kept recycling that same number. A specific number sounds more scientific than, it depends. Even when it depends is the actual truth. So what does real research on habit formation actually say? A study out of University College London tracked people trying to build genuinely new habits, things like drinking more water or exercising daily, and measured exactly how long it took for the behavior to feel automatic. The average wasn't 21 days, not even close. It was 66 days. And that's just the average. The full range across participants stretched from 18 days on the extremely fast end, all the way to 254 days on the slow end. Read that range again. 18 days to 254 days. That's not a small margin of error. That's roughly a 14 times difference between the fastest and slowest habit formers in the exact same study. Here's the part that actually matters for you. Drinking a glass of water after breakfast is a completely different task neurologically than becoming a person who exercises daily. Simple habits with almost no resistance can form fast, in a couple of weeks. Complex habits, ones that require real effort, planning, or fighting an existing routine, can genuinely take 2, 3, sometimes 4 times longer than that famous 21-day number promised you. You were never failing at day 21. You were just further along on a road that was always going to be longer than you were told. There's also a hidden cost nobody talks about: opportunity cost. Every time someone quits at day 21 because it should be automatic by now, they don't just lose that habit. They lose the specific data point that would have told them their actual timeline. Instead of learning, my writing habit needs about 70 days, they learn, I'm bad at building habits, which is a completely different, far more damaging conclusion. One is useful information. The other is a wound that follows you into the next habit you try to build, and the one after that. Let's talk about why this myth does actual damage, not just mild inconvenience. When you believe a habit should be automatic by day 21 and it isn't, your brain doesn't conclude the timeline was wrong. It concludes, I am the problem. That's a devastating blow to self-trust. Completely unnecessary. Built entirely on a made-up number from a plastic surgery book that was never about habits in the first place. This is exactly why so many people have a graveyard of abandoned habits behind them. Not because they lack discipline, but because they kept quitting right around the moment real progress usually starts to show up. Let me tell you about the exact moment this myth cost me something real. I was trying to build a daily writing habit, 10 minutes a day, nothing extreme. By day 21, it still felt like dragging a heavy bag across a room every single time I sat down. I remember thinking, almost word for word, if this were actually going to become a habit, it wouldn't still feel this hard. I stopped that day, convinced I'd picked the wrong habit, the wrong time, the wrong approach entirely. 2 months later, I was doing research for something completely unrelated. I found the actual study, 66 days average. My exact habit, daily writing, sits firmly on the harder end of that range in most research on the topic. I hadn't failed at day 21. I had quit at roughly the 1/3 mark of a totally normal timeline. And I blamed myself entirely for something that was never really about willpower at all. Now, let's actually break down what's happening in your brain during habit formation, because understanding the mechanism changes how the weight feels. Habits live in a part of your brain called the basal ganglia, and building one means physically strengthening a specific neural pathway through repetition, essentially carving a groove that gets a little deeper every single time you repeat the behavior. Early on, that groove is shallow. Your brain still roots the decision through effortful, conscious thinking every time. That's exactly why it feels so heavy and deliberate at first. As the groove deepens through repeated practice, the behavior slowly shifts towards something closer to automatic, requiring less and less conscious effort each time. That groove doesn't care what day of the month it is. It only cares about repetitions and how much resistance each repetition had to overcome. Here's something that might genuinely surprise you. Missing a day here or there doesn't actually reset your progress the way people assume it does. The same UCL research found something specific. Occasional missed days had no measurable impact on whether the habit eventually formed. What mattered was the overall consistency across the full stretch of time, not a flawless, unbroken streak. That means the all-or-nothing mindset isn't just harsh. The one where missing a single day feels like starting completely over. It's not even backed by the actual data. So if the number was fake, what should you actually be tracking instead? Not days, repetitions, and how much friction each one takes. Here's a genuinely useful reframe. Instead of asking, has it been 21 days yet? Ask, does this feel even slightly easier than it did 2 weeks ago? That question tracks real neurological progress. Counting days on a calendar tracks nothing except how patient you're being with a process that was never on a fixed schedule to begin with. There's a second practical shift worth making here. Stop expecting a single dramatic moment where the habit clicks all at once. Real habit formation isn't a light switch flipping from off to on. It's a dimmer, sliding gradually from difficult toward automatic, so slowly that you usually only notice the shift in hindsight, looking back and realizing you did the thing today without the internal argument you used to have with yourself every single time. Complexity is the single biggest factor in how long a habit actually takes. More than motivation, more than willpower, more than how badly you want it. Drinking water after a meal requires almost no decision-making and very little friction, so it forms fast. Becoming a person who exercises daily requires planning, physical discomfort, time investment, and fighting an existing routine that's been running on autopilot for years. Comparing those two timelines and expecting them to match was never realistic in the first place. If you're currently in the middle of building something and it still feels hard, here's the honest reframe. Hard at week 3 isn't a warning sign. It's actually the statistically normal, expected middle of the process. For most habits worth building, the finish line was simply moved much further out than a 60-year-old myth ever told you it would be. Let's talk about how this plays out differently, depending on what you're actually building, because not all habits deserve the same expectations. A habit that removes something tends to feel hard for longer. Like cutting late-night phone scrolling, you're fighting an existing groove instead of building a new one from scratch. A habit that adds something small and pleasant tends to automate faster. Like a 2-minute stretch after waking up, there's almost nothing competing against it. Stacking a new habit onto an already automatic one tends to speed things up too. Like flossing right after brushing your teeth. You're borrowing an existing groove instead of digging a brand new one. None of this was ever about willpower being stronger or weaker. It was always about how much existing resistance a specific habit has to overcome. Practical step you can use immediately. Stop counting days on a calendar entirely. Track repetitions instead. A simple tally. A check mark. Anything low effort. Every single time you do the thing, mark it. Regardless of what day number it happens to be. That single shift removes the artificial 21-day deadline. Your brain has been quietly measuring itself against this entire time. Second practical step. When a habit still feels hard at what you assumed was the finish line, don't take that as proof you're failing. Take it as confirmation. You're dealing with a genuinely complex habit. One that was always going to take real repetitions to rewire, not evidence that something's fundamentally broken in you. One more thing worth knowing. Even the 66-day average isn't the finish line you're racing toward. It's a midpoint in a wide distribution, not a deadline. Some habits genuinely never fully automate. They stay effortful forever. And that's not failure either. That's just the nature of certain behaviors. Waking up at 5 a.m. might always take some willpower, even for people who've done it for years. The goal was never zero effort. The goal was less effort than day one. And that bar gets cleared far more often than the fake 21-day deadline ever let you notice. If you've quit something before, right around that 21-day mark, convinced you'd failed, I want you to sit with something for a second. You didn't fail. You were handed a number that was never designed to predict your specific habit, your specific brain, or your specific starting point. That number came from a plastic surgeon watching people adjust to new faces in the 1960s. And somehow, it's been quietly running your self-judgment ever since. Thanks for watching all the way to the end. If this helped you see your own failed habits a little differently, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're just getting started on understanding how our own minds actually work.